This is part 5 of Federalist number 37. We're going to start at paragraph 10. The experience of ages with the continued and combined labors of the most enlightened legislators and jurists have been equally unsuccessful in delineating the several objects and limits of different codes of law and different tribunals of justice. The precise extent of the common law, the statute law, the maritime law, the ecclesiastical law, the law of corporations, and other local laws and customs remain still to be clearly and finally established in Great Britain, where accuracy in such subjects has been more industriously pursued than in any other part of the world. See, he's talking about different categories of laws that relate to what happens on the sea, like maritime law, ecclesiastical law, laws that have to do with aspects of religious or religion, or things that are related to religion. Common law, these are usually laws that have to do with precedent. And precedent, I mentioned earlier, a case that has preceded before in the past and has been decided and has become norm. And statute law is like the laws that would be passed in the United States, passed by the Congress of the United States. So I can't go too much in depth in this, but he says, look, all these categories of laws exist. Even though Great Britain has been working on it better than any other country in the world, there are still some points that are not clear. See, again, he's going back to the point of conception. Our understanding of things vary. The difficulty because of language and because of our perception to understand things and agree with others, a lot of times 100%. So he says, he's trying to say all of these. He says that you have to keep in mind that when we got together in the convention in Philadelphia, we had to realize that we were dealing with, we're talking with people from all sorts of backgrounds, with all sorts of perception of what is their interest. So as a result of that, we have come up with a plan that's a compromise between all these parts of the United States. So he constantly wants to bring that up. And I'll continue. The jurisdiction of her several courts, general and local, of law, of equity, of admiralty, is not less a source of frequent and intricate discussions sufficiently denoting the indeterminate limits by which they are respectively circumscribed. All new laws, though penned with the greatest technical skill and less obscure and equivocal until their meaning be liquidated and ascertained by a series of particular discussions and adjudications. Even he says here, let's say lawmakers write a law, but you have to wait till a case arises and it goes in front of a court, gets discussed, and see how they will look at it, how they will start comprehending it and applying it. That gradually becomes the law, not exactly what you've written on the paper. So he's saying, again, when you're dealing with human beings, language, there are these difficulties. Besides the obscurity arising from the complexity of objects and the imperfection of human faculties, the medium through which the conceptions of man are conveyed to each other, adds a fresh embarrassment. The use of words is to express idea. Perspicuity, therefore, requires not only that the ideas should be distinctly formed, but that they should be expressed by words distinctly and exclusively appropriated to them. But no language is so copious as to supply words and phrases for every complex idea, or so correct as not to include many equivocally denoting different ideas. Hence, it must happen that however accurately objects may be discriminated in themselves, and however accurately the discrimination may be considered, the definition of them may be rendered inaccurate by the inaccuracy of the terms in which it is delivered. And this unavoidable inaccuracy must be greater or less according to the complexity and novelty of the objects defined. Now, I love this sentence. When the Almighty Himself condescends to address mankind in their own language, His meaning, luminous as it must be, is rendered dim and doubtful by the cloudy medium through which it is communicated. See, he says even the Word of God, which is the clearest word, gets read differently, gets understood differently by different people. That's why, for example, in Christianity we have so many sects. It's the same Bible, but they read it differently, and they start a group, a sect. The reason he says this is because he had seen in his own state of Virginia how at that time Baptists, who were the minority, just remember at that time Baptists were minority, not like right now. But at that time they were minority, and they were harassed, and they were bothered, and their rights were being violated by the majority group in Virginia, which were Anglicans. So he's saying that you've got to keep that in mind, that even the Word of God gets interpreted differently, and people start different religions based on the same word. So you can imagine what would happen that us human beings, fallible human beings, when we write things or when we discuss things, how it could be interpreted differently, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. So again, he's bringing this up because at the beginning of this article, he said people are, without even reading this material or superficially reading this Constitution, they are denigrating us, they are telling that we have sinister designs, we have plans, bad plans. So he's saying, again, focusing on fallibility of human being, and the fact that 55 people could get together in the convention and come up with this thing is amazing itself, he says. So let me read this last sentence again. When the Almighty Himself condescends to address mankind in their own language, His meaning, luminous as it must be, luminous, clear, full of light, transcendent, transparent, is rendered dim and doubtful by the cloudy medium through which it is communicated. And this cloudy medium is the language. Even the words of God, as clear, as luminous as they are, may be misread. Here then are three sources of vague and incorrect definitions, indistinctness of the object, imperfection of the organ of conception, inadequateness of vehicle of ideas. Any one of these must produce a certain degree of obscurity. The convention, in delineating the boundary between the federal and state jurisdictions, must have experienced the full effect of them. He says, people who gathered in the Federal Convention realized what problems may arise, so they have tried to set up a line where state and federal governments will be responsible for in their own zone, in their own area. Now remember, as we've said in the past, there are areas that they'll have concurrent jurisdiction, where both federal and the state government will have jurisdiction. Its laws will apply. But he says in other parts, they are distinct, they are separate, so we have tried to write a constitution where everybody can practice, can do their work in the right sphere correctly. In other words, neither the federal government nor the state government will overstep its bounds.